Welcome. Today we're going to talk about elements and compounds, but we'll focus on elements. And we want to ask ourselves a few questions. The first one is, what is the definition of an element? And we'll put that in our notebooks later on. The next thing we want to ask is which elements make up the different parts of the Earth. And we want to know what the elements are in the solid parts of the Earth, the living organisms, the oceans, as well as the air. And the last thing we're going to ask ourselves, and we'll answer this a little bit later on in the week, is what's the difference between an element and a compound? But first we're going to focus on the elements in our notebook. So here we are in our notebook. Again, it's on page 27. So make sure you do that. It is on the right hand side, and you need to title it Elements. And the first thing we're going to do, as we mentioned earlier, is basically define what an element is. So you'll write an element is, and then we'll include our first bullet point. In the first bullet point, an element is a pure substance. It's not mixed with anything else. It's completely on its own. The second thing we're going to put is that it cannot be broken down. Again, it's completely pure. So we can't break it down into something more simple. And we'll get more into that in the classroom and explain that a little bit more. And then finally, an element maintains its chemical identity. Again, it's completely pure. Nothing can make it different. It'll always be identified the same thing, and it always has the same properties to make it its own. So now we're going to talk about the two main things that we really need to know about that an element has. And we can find this information in the periodic table. And the periodic table gives us different information on the elements. And you're going to see lots of different numbers and things like that that will be a little bit confusing at first. We'll go over them, but we're going to focus on two main factors that you'll find in the periodic table. The first one, and probably one of the most important, is that each element has a chemical symbol. And the chemical symbols have rules. Basically, they are single or have two letters, sometimes even three. And we'll get more into the rules. The second thing that you need to notice in the squares of the periodic table is basically the element name. And these are the things that you'll see, and you'll recognize some things in elements, like oxygen or carbon to make like carbon dioxide, hydrogen, and then some familiar things that you've probably seen before, like gold and copper and some other pure elements. So this is an example of the periodic table. Again, you're going to get something like this in class, and it'll kind of explain what the squares look like, or when each square represents an element. So we're going to kind of draw this first one here, which is hydrogen, so that we can always have something to reference. You will get a periodic table to put inside your notebook, but it's going to be pretty small. And we're going to use it for a different purpose rather than finding information like the names and the different numbers. So I'm drawing a box to represent the first element. So I'm going to put number 1 up top, and all the elements are in order from left to right and then keep going down. And that number is called the atomic number. And we'll explain a little bit more what that is. You don't need to be tested over it. You'll learn more about it in chemistry. But for what we need to know, it's in this case hydrogen is number 1. And then I'm going to write a weird number down here, and that is what they call the atomic mass. And it's kind of like the mass of that atom of, in this case, hydrogen. So again, as we mentioned above, the two main things in regards to elements that we need to know is the chemical symbol. In this case, the chemical symbol is H. It's nothing weird. It's not a picture. All chemical symbols are pretty much just letters. And also in the chemical symbols, they usually start off with a capital letter, and then usually the second and third letters are lowercase. If you see something with more than one capital letter, then you're dealing with more than one kind of element. Of course, the last thing you're going to need to know is the element name. In this case, it's hydrogen. So it's basically the word, and then the H, in this case, is the symbol. A lot of the times they are almost like acronyms or abbreviations to the word. So in this case, an abbreviation for hydrogen would obviously be H. And that's pretty much it. So I'm just going to kind of move it up to make sure that you kind of see what your notes should look like as well. Get all this done and you'll be set and ready to go tomorrow.